Sir, you need to vacate this seat immediately. First class is for Platinum Elite passengers only. The words hung in the stale cabin air like a final verdict. The plane rocked gently in mid-turbulence as James Harrison looked up from his tablet, blinking once as he processed the sudden challenge. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he straightened in seat 1A, brushing an invisible wrinkle from his lapel, his breathing steady. He had flown this route dozens of times. He had earned every mile, every upgrade, every credential. But today, none of that seemed to matter. The lead flight attendant, Brenda Walsh, stood over him with crossed arms and a face that said she had already made up her mind. "You need to move to economy," she said again, louder this time, glancing at the other first-class passengers for support. A few heads turned. Some leaned closer. In seat 1B, Arthur Finch, a well-dressed white man in a paisley tie, snorted and said with a smirk, "He doesn't belong up here. Probably wandered up front thinking no one would notice." Another passenger adjusted his camera phone, subtly beginning to record. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? If what's happening to James feels familiar, leave a comment below. Justice only matters when we speak up. Stay with us, because in just 25 minutes, this man turns the tables without ever leaving his seat." James set down his tablet and looked Brenda in the eye. "Check your records," he said calmly. "I'm in the right seat." Brenda's lips tightened. "Your ticket says economy. Take your assigned seat or we'll have to involve security when we land." She pulled a paper stub from her pocket and thrust it toward him. "Here, take this. You're assigned 24C. James glanced at it and didn't take it. "That's not my name," he replied. "And that's not my seat." Kevin Miller, the cabin supervisor, appeared behind Brenda, scrolling on his crew tablet with quick flicks of his finger. "Confirmed," he said loud enough for the nearby row to hear. "This passenger is not on the manifest for 1A. His booking must have been reassigned." He turned the screen briefly to show a blank space under James' name. "You've been flagged. You need to move." Arthur leaned forward again. C knew something was off. "This is first class, not charity seating." Murmurs rippled across the cabin as James sat still, breathing evenly, his fingertips resting on the armrest. "You're making a mistake," he said, "and every step you take is being logged." The plane shook gently again as the pilot adjusted altitude. Someone in 2D pulled out their phone. The screen of James's seat suddenly went dark. Kevin grinned. "You're disconnected now." James turned to him. "So are you." Brenda rolled her eyes. "We'll let the captain know you're refusing to comply." But she hadn't checked the passenger records thoroughly. She hadn't recognized the quiet force behind those calm eyes. James Harrison, age 58, wasn't just another businessman in a sharp navy blazer. He was the founder and CEO of Omnisys Solutions, the very firm that Apex Air had recently signed a multi-million-dollar contract with to modernize their passenger verification and seat reservation systems. The irony was thick, but James wasn't interested in theatrics. What mattered now was exposure. What mattered was letting them dig their own grave with each careless command. Behind him, in seat 2B, Sophia Diaz, an Omnisys systems analyst, watched quietly, already navigating her tablet to Apex Air's internal crew behavior records. In 3A, Daniel Croft, a seasoned CNN field correspondent, had started a discreet live stream, his camera angled low, his face unreadable. In 1C, Chloe Singh, an active Reddit user with a large following in r/aviation, had begun recording with a single tap. In the economy cabin, Olivia Reed, Omnisys's head legal advisor, was texting James updates from the system logs. Kevin just posted on crew chat, unauthorized in 1A. I'm tracking everything. Up in the cockpit, pilot David Chen tapped a button near his collar that activated his personal body cam, an unofficial safety measure he'd taken since the last time he saw a black passenger falsely accused. And on the other end of a private satellite line, Apex Air COO Diane Summers picked up her phone with a puzzled voice. "James," she said. "What's going on?" He spoke clearly into the seat console handset. "Diane, I want you to pull up Brenda Walsh's file specifically past passenger interactions." There was a pause. Then Diane's voice returned, hushed and troubled. "2 documented complaints, both racial bias. 1 filed internally, 1 external. Never disciplined. I'm flagging this now." James ended the call and looked at Brenda without a hint of a smile. "You might want to prepare a statement," he said. "I don't think your supervisors are going to back you up much longer." Sophia's tablet pinged with confirmation Brenda's record was loaded. Kevin's recent system changes were visible. And Carol Jennings, the in-flight manager, was listed as recently locking James's profile without cause. Sophia sent a quiet text to James. "Everything's here. You're clear." "She's not." James nodded. The cabin rumbled again, but it wasn't just the engines now. The tension was shifting. People sensed something was unfolding beyond a seating dispute. Chloe Singh looked up from her phone and said aloud, just loud enough to carry this man's not causing a scene. "He's being targeted." A few passengers murmured. Arthur scoffed. "He's overreacting. Just take the damn economy seat." Kevin looked toward Brenda. "Want me to print a removal notice?" Brenda nodded. "Do it." James raised his voice not in anger, but with conviction. "Do that, and you'll be explaining it on every major network before we land." It was already too late. The footage was uploading the stream had crossed 50,000 viewers, and Sophia had just entered an OmniSys override code that granted them access to crew directives quietly stored in Apex Air's training app. One line caught her attention. "Prioritize elite appearance profiles when resolving conflicts." It was tagged active. She looked up, stunned. "James," she whispered. "I found the trigger." He didn't look away from Brenda. "Send it, because in 25 minutes justice wouldn't just be spoken, it would be automated." The cabin lights dimmed slightly as turbulence persisted, but the tension brewing in first class had nothing to do with the weather. Brenda Walsh returned to the front row with a new strategy this time, with the microphone in her hand. She clicked it on, cleared her throat, and addressed the entire cabin in an even tone that barely masked the panic behind it. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're addressing a security concern in the forward cabin. Please remain seated and refrain from recording or engaging." The announcement dropped like a stone in water. Conversations halted. Heads turned. Kevin Miller, already seated at the jump seat nearby, tapped into the crew app again and publicly flagged James Harrison's seat as compromised. His caption read, "Potential risk in 1A, no confirmed ID match." In the row ahead, Arthur Finch shot James a disgusted look, stood up despite the fastened seatbelt sign, and shoved James's shoulder. "You heard her," he barked. "This is about our safety. Apex is just protecting us." James stayed seated, his jaw tight, but his voice level. "Touch me again," he said, "and I promise your name will be known for all the wrong reasons." Chloe Singh, who had stayed silent until now, stood as well, her voice strong and pointed. "Where's the evidence?" she asked. "You're accusing this man of what exactly?" Kevin snapped his head toward her. "Ma'am, I need you to sit down immediately." Passengers, now visibly anxious from the turbulence and the rising tension, began to murmur louder. "Remove him," someone said. "Why are they letting this continue? Why is he resisting?" James looked straight ahead and spoke to no one in particular. "This is criminal slander." Brenda didn't flinch. She turned to Kevin and whispered something unintelligible. And moments later, Kevin tapped a new command into the app. James's reservation was now marked restricted. The screen at 1A blinked and shut down again. Kevin leaned in. "You're not staying here," he said coldly. "Your record's locked. You've been removed from the manifest." Carol Jennings, the in-flight manager, who had been watching from a few rows back, stepped forward and whispered to Brenda, "He's a problem. Do it now." With a simple click on her tablet, Carol locked James's Skyflyer profile using their satellite link. A chime rang in the cabin. James, now glancing calmly between them, said, "You're all exposed, and you don't even realize it." Arthur turned to the cabin. "Come on, folks, who wants this guy up here?" He laughed and pointed. "First class isn't a shelter. Apex is for elites." Kevin, emboldened, approached with a folded sheet of paper in hand. "Mr. Harrison, this is your formal removal notice. You're to move to the economy section immediately or face legal consequences." Phones lit up, screens glowed. James didn't touch the paper. Instead, he glanced down at his smartwatch. "This is being documented," he said. "All of it." Then came a quiet moment of memory. James's mind clear. Despite the storm around him, flashed back to a conference in 2011 where a boardroom of white investors told him Omnisys would never win FAA contracts because aviation is about legacy, not disruption. That was the day he began designing Omnisys's proprietary conflict tracking system, and it was running now. In the cockpit, David Chen adjusted his headset and checked a secondary feed he had just overheard Carol, via a mistakenly open crew channel, mutter older black men like him never fit right in first class. David blinked. Then he reached for his phone and quietly texted the quote to Chloe Singh in 1C. Her eyes widened as she read the message. She looked over at Daniel Croft, who nodded silently. He had captured Carol's voice, too, from his live stream in seat 3A. "We've got it," he whispered. "We have the motive." In a matter of seconds, Daniel's CNN feed crossed 150,000 live viewers. The headline beneath the video read, "Bias in the Sky, Apex Passenger Faces Allegations with No Proof." In her seat, Chloe was already typing. She opened Reddit and dropped the first explosive post in r// Aviation, attaching a screenshot of Carol's directive, which Sophia had quietly sent her prioritize elite appearance profiles when resolving seat conflicts. She wrote, "I'm on Apex Flight 227, black man in 1A being humiliated, no reason. Crew is lying. They have a protocol targeting passengers by looks. We have proof." She signed off with hashtag Apex Bias. In less than 2 minutes, her post hit the front page. 5 minutes later, it had 500,000 upvotes. The comments section exploded, "Unreal, sue them, boycott Apex." Screenshots spread to Twitter and Facebook. Sophia, still silent, in 2B activated Omnisys's internal mirroring tool, capturing every input from the crew tablets in real time. She whispered to James, "The directive is active. I just found Carol's override code." James gave a slow nod, then adjusted the collar of his blazer. The murmurs in the cabin grew louder. Someone stood in the aisle. "You're not throwing him out," the man said. "This is wrong." Carol appeared again and began ordering passengers to sit, yelling phones down, all of them. "This is confidential." But no one listened. Screens lit up everywhere now. Daniel's CNN feed had crossed 300,000 live. NBC's onboard crew in 4A began setting up a proper camera. A child in 2C whispered, "Daddy, are they bullying that man?" Kevin's face was red. "That Reddit post is fake," he shouted. Carol gritted her teeth and turned to Brenda. "Confiscate the phones, I don't care how." But she didn't move. She had seen the same thing everyone else had. The entire cabin, first-class economy, and beyond was watching, and the world was watching with them. The air inside the first-class cabin had become thick with noise tension and digital heat. Carol Jennings, holding the intercom like a weapon, clicked it on and declared, for the safety of our passengers and crew, we are addressing a confirmed threat in the forward cabin. "Remain calm." Her voice was crisp, rehearsed the same way you'd expect a pre-recorded evacuation notice to sound. But everyone knew exactly who she meant. Arthur Finch, never one to miss a performance, stood up, snatched a drink coaster from the service tray, and flung it at James Harrison's chest with a sneer. "This seat's not yours. You were never supposed to be here," he said loud enough for every aisle to hear. The coaster bounced harmlessly off James's navy blazer, landing face down beside his tablet. James didn't move. He picked it up, placed it back on the tray, and said, "What you just did will follow you longer than this flight." But Kevin Miller wasn't done. From the galley, he grinned, tapped a new command into the crew app, and said coldly, "You're officially erased." A quiet beep followed. James's name disappeared from the flight manifest entirely. Passengers gasped. One muttered, "Did he just wipe the guy out of the system?" Daniel Croft, still streaming from 3A, zoomed in on the app screen as it flashed red. NBC's onboard producer in 4A whispered into her mic, "We're staying on this. Do not cut." Brenda Walsh watched her face tightening as the consequences caught up with the lies. James looked up at Carol. "You've locked yourself into this and the door's closing," just behind James. Sophia Diaz tapped away furiously. "They've overwritten your profile," she whispered. "But I've already mirrored the code. We can flip this." In the distance, David Chen sent a silent cockpit transmission. He had just recorded Carol calling James an image risk. Her words, sourced straight from her headset, were already uploading to a secure drive. Arthur turned again and shouted to the whole cabin. "How much longer are we going to let this guy play victim? This is first class. It's for people who built something, not for someone who stumbled in." James blinked once. "You want to talk about building something," he said softly. "I've spent 30 years building what you're about to see fall apart." For a moment, time stilled. The screens flickered once more as turbulence rolled through the cabin like a slow wave. In his mind, James was back in a New York boardroom 12 years ago, surrounded by executives who dismissed him. Aviation belongs to institutions, one had said. You're not one of them. That same week, Omnisys Solutions was born from his home office, funded on personal savings, and a promise to his late father. James had sworn then that no system would ever erase someone like him again. And now the time had come to make good on that vow. He reached down, pulled a slim Omnisys USB from his briefcase, and handed it backward to Daniel Croft without turning. "Get this to CNN," he said. "It's time." Kevin lunged forward to intercept, but Daniel already had it in his grip. In seat 2B, Sophia pulled out her own secondary device and began uploading from Omnisys's secured satellite channel. Just in case. "Backup's on the way," she said. "We're taking their filter algorithm public." In the aisle, passengers whispered, "Did he just say CNN? Is he leaking something?" Carol caught on. "Stop them!" she barked at Brenda. "Shut this down now!" But Brenda didn't move. She'd seen enough. 10 rows back, Olivia Reed's phone pinged. "CNN online," the message read. "Uploading now." In 3A, Daniel opened the USB and launched the file Apex Internal Filtering Protocol PDF. The document was horrifying. a coded algorithm that factored race, age, and attire into automatic seat validation checks. Tags like Proforesight Profile Mismatch Risk Appearance Level 2 recommend reassignment. Within 2 minutes, the file hit CNN. Calm under the headline, Exclusive Apex's internal system penalizes passengers based on appearance. On screen, the anchor's voice cracked through. This just in: CNN has obtained verified documents showing Apex Airlines uses an internal algorithm to suppress seating rights for certain passengers. We're learning more about a man currently on board who may have triggered this by simply sitting in his assigned seat. Comments flooded in. This is outrageous. Systemic profiling on a plane, he warned them. Within 8 minutes, the page hit 10 million views. Sophia, still working in the seat behind James, piped the CNN stream directly into the cabin via the in-seat screens overriding the previous flight info. One by one, passengers turned to see a CNN graphic labeled Apex's Biased Algorithm: The Breakdown. Carol's face turned pale. Kevin stood frozen. Arthur backed away toward 1C, muttering, "This can't be real." But it was. The numbers were real. The code was real. The system was exposed. NBC's camera turned its full attention to James, who hadn't moved from his seat in 1A. He picked up his tablet, refreshed the feed, and saw the headline for himself. A quiet vibration buzzed on his wrist. It was Olivia. Her message: DOJ just opened an investigation. You're clear to proceed. He typed back, shut it down. Sophia leaned forward. You sure? He nodded once. Kill switch protocol. She tapped the icon on her dashboard, Omnisys console command ready. Daniel looked at James. You planned for this? James replied simply. I planned for every version of this. The cabin was silent. Every screen showed the same image now, Apex's algorithm exposed, streaming live on CNN. In 1C, Chloe Singh posted the video feed to RSARS Aviation, with the caption, he warned them they didn't listen. The post surged past 1 million upvotes within minutes. Carol turned and hissed to Brenda, tell the pilot to lock the system, block all external access. But in the cockpit, David Chen had already overridden the order. Too late, he said aloud to no one. It's out. James looked around the cabin not to savor the moment, but to mark it. This wasn't about revenge. It was about visibility. You tried to erase me, he said calmly to Kevin, Brenda, and Carol. But I designed the system you used, and I kept a back door open always. And from his seat, James Harrison took command of the narrative because some systems don't get fixed from the outside. Sometimes you have to sit down to shut it all down. At Apex Air corporate headquarters in Dallas, the mood had shifted from Friday quiet to full-blown emergency. Conference calls buzzed on speakerphones. Executives stood around glass-walled offices with furrowed brows and half-drunk coffees, refreshing their phones with shaking hands. On the central wall of the operations center, a live CNN feed played in grim silence. The words at the bottom of the screen read, Breaking Apex Algorithm Discriminates by Appearance. Source, CEO of Omnisys. Onboard Flight 227 Robert Shaw. Apex's CEO burst into the war room holding his tablet like it was a live grenade. What the hell happened? He barked. Why is James Harrison's name attached to this? One of the digital officers, pale-faced and sweating, stammered. We didn't know it was him, sir. The crew flagged him as suspicious. System Auto reported a mismatch. Robert slammed the tablet on the table. You don't mismatch a man who built your infrastructure. Carol Jennings's name flashed across the top of the screen as CNN played back her in-flight announcement about a security concern. Robert watched the footage in stunned silence. Then he turned to legal. Who authorized our software to scan for appearance mismatches? A junior compliance officer shrugged. That protocol, it was buried in a 2021 update. No one's claimed ownership since. In the corner, Apex's media liaison whispered, #Apex Bias is trending above the Super Bowl. It just hit 20 million views. Robert rubbed his temple, shut down external feeds, locked social media, and someone get Carol on the line now. But the line wasn't connecting because Carol was still airborne, and she had no idea her career was about to hit the tarmac harder than the plane itself. Back on Flight 227, turbulence rocked the aircraft as passengers sat riveted by the drama unfolding on their in-seat screens. The cabin wasn't angry anymore. It was silent, still watching James Harrison with a kind of collective awe. He hadn't stood up. He hadn't raised his voice. Yet from Seat 1A, with nothing but his tablet and a team of unseen allies, he had exposed a national scandal and forced the world to listen. Brenda Walsh, who had once towered over him with orders, now hovered near the galley, gripping a cabinet for balance, her eyes wide and darting. Kevin Miller had stopped pretending to be in control. He stood frozen near the cockpit door, sweat dripping from his temple. In economy, passengers craned their necks to glimpse the first-class cabin like it was the front row of history. "Is that him?" someone whispered. "That's the guy who brought it all down." James didn't react. He was scanning server logs sent by Sophia from 2B. Every keystroke. Carol made every override. Kevin tapped every racist comment captured on cockpit surveillance. It was all there compiled, tied up ready. And then his phone buzzed. Olivia Reed's message flashed. Robert just tried to blame Carol. She blamed Kevin. They're all panicking. You're green-lit. James responded with 2 words. Do it. Sophia took a steady breath and tapped a new command, OmniSys Global Override. Execute System Freeze. At that moment, Apex's live ticketing software, used in over 70 airports and linked to more than 200 international travel partners, began to slow, then fail. Customers attempting to book flights were met with frozen screens, error messages, and blank loadouts. Agents at airport counters stared in confusion as boarding confirmations vanished. And within 5 minutes, Apex's entire booking operation was offline. Daniel Croft, still filming, got the message from his producer in Atlanta. They shut the system down. It's real. This is historic. He whispered to James, they're cooked. James nodded once. Not yet, but they're close. Sophia leaned in from behind. It's complete. We've locked every non-critical system. Emergency ops remain, but they can't sell a seat, not until we release it. In the cockpit, David Chen got the alert, glanced back at the chaos in first class, and smiled faintly. Good, he murmured. About time someone held them accountable. At Apex HQ, screens started going dark. Error alerts flooded the command center. Booking queued down. Someone yelled. Web interface is frozen, another shouted. Robert Shaw stared mouth open as he realized what James had done. He's not exposing us, he whispered. He's disabling us. Legal asked, is this cyber crime? The CTO shook his head. OmniSys is in our vendor contract. They have fail-safe authority under abuse protocols, and this qualifies. Robert's hands trembled. He's holding us hostage. Then a louder alert hit the main screen. Forbes.com breaking news. James Harrison shuts down Apex booking system, mid-flight airline accused of systemic discrimination. The article included Sophia's screenshots, Chloe Singh's Reddit post, and links to the full CNN leak. A quote from James appeared in bold. I didn't want to crash their system. I wanted to hold up a mirror. This is what happens when you design injustice into the code. The comms team dropped their phones. The legal team stood in stunned silence. Robert whispered, We're finished. Onboard, Kevin tried one last time to recover control. We can fix this. He told Carol, whose hands trembled as she stared at her now disabled crew tablet. Maybe we can tell James it was a system glitch, but she didn't reply, because her tablet had just rebooted with a new screen, one she hadn't seen before. It read, "System Override initiated by OmniSys Command J. Harrison." Below it, a message pulsed, "Terminate access." She tapped it instinctively, and the screen blinked off permanently. From seat 1A. James turned to her, calm, composed. "That was your last input." And then his eyes lifted to the cabin as a new notification flashed across every screen system suspended pending compliance review. James picked up his tablet, typed a final line into the command log, and sent it to Olivia. "Now we talk terms," she replied instantly. "Forbes just hit 5 million shares. They're calling it a digital mutiny. You're trending worldwide." He set the tablet down and folded his hands. Around him, first-class passengers, once silent, complicit, indifferent, were now witnesses. No one reached for champagne. No one complained about service. They watched a man wronged in silence rewrite the rules mid-air. The plane flew on steady and smooth now, but for Apex Air, the ground had already begun to fall away. At cruising altitude, with the booking system suspended and CNN streaming live to every seat screen, the cabin of Flight 227 had gone quiet. Not the silence of fear, but of realization. First-class passengers who had once glared now sat still, their eyes pinned to the man in seat 1A, who hadn't raised his voice, hadn't moved an inch, and yet had brought an entire airline to its knees. James Harrison tapped once on his tablet, sending a secure message to Olivia Reed. "Bring Robert in. I want him face to face." And 5 minutes later, a live video feed blinked onto the cabin's overhead screens. There, in a boardroom back in Dallas, stood Robert Shaw, tie loosened, face pale, flanked by 2 Apex attorneys and one visibly shaken PR rep. He cleared his throat. "James," he began, his voice strained, "we're asking you to restore the system. This has become a crisis beyond your personal case." James didn't blink. "Your crisis began the moment your crew decided my presence was a threat. I'm here to resolve it, but I do so on my terms." Robert tried to recover. "We're prepared to issue a formal apology and investigate the matter fully." James looked down at the list on his screen and read aloud without emotion. Fire. Brenda Walsh. Fire Kevin Miller. Fire Carol Jennings. Ban Arthur Finch from future flights. Acknowledge your algorithmic bias publicly. Then we talk about restoring your system. The attorneys murmured off-screen. Carol, watching the screen from the galley, staggered back a step, her face flushed. "He can't do this," she whispered. But the crew tablets were still locked, still flashing James's override. They could do nothing but watch. Robert swallowed hard. "We'll need a moment to confirm termination protocols." James raised one brow. "You don't have a moment. Your booking loss is just past $14 million. Every minute is a mile deeper." Kevin's arms folded and jaw clenched. Shook his head. "This is a setup. You people and your—" He stopped himself, realizing too late the entire plane was listening. Daniel Croft's CNN stream was now echoing that moment to viewers across the country. Brenda tried to step forward. "I didn't mean harm. I was just doing my job." But James turned to her, measured and cool. "Your job was to serve, not to decide who deserves dignity." A tone sounded. Olivia's message appeared. "Legal just authorized the terminations. They're doing it live, all 3. A new feed appeared on screen showing Apex's boardroom as 3 internal emails were projected on the wall: termination of Brenda Walsh, flight services termination of Kevin Miller. Cabin supervisor termination of Carol Jennings, in-flight operations. One by one, the three were formally dismissed. Robert looked up, the weight in his voice unmistakable. "They're gone. We've done as you asked. Now please unlock the system." James didn't answer immediately. He turned to look at Brenda, who now stood hollow-eyed, clinging to the edge of the galley wall. Kevin's fists clenched. Carol, already seated in the rear, stared straight ahead, as if hearing nothing. Then James said quietly, "They're gone, but what they represented is not." Arthur Finch, still seated in 1B, leaned back and muttered under his breath. "This is absurd. They're letting you play judge-jury," James cut in. "Mr. Finch, you kicked a man's briefcase. You incited bias. You weaponized perception. And you will never fly Apex Air again." Robert nodded grimly on screen. "Your frequent flyer status is revoked permanently." Arthur stood furious and was promptly told by a flight attendant to return to his seat or risk arrest upon landing. He sat silent, smaller. Then came the moment no one expected. Robert looked up and asked, "Who are you, James?" The question wasn't rhetorical. It carried a kind of desperation, as if realizing too late that they'd underestimated the man in seat 1A. James closed his tablet, folded his hands, and spoke to the entire cabin, the airline board, and millions watching live. "I am James Harrison, CEO of Omnisys Solutions, former FAA Senior Systems Consultant Architect of 3 aviation security frameworks. The systems you rely on, I designed them. The back doors you didn't know about, I built those too. And when I boarded this flight, I didn't come here to wage war. I came here to observe. But what I saw couldn't be ignored." The silence that followed was heavy. Daniel's live stream jumped to 9 million viewers in less than 60 seconds. Chloe Singh's Reddit thread surged again as people clipped James's words into quote cards. "I didn't come to wage war. I came to observe." Robert sat back in his chair. "We had no idea." James replied, "That's the problem." And then, just as the moment reached its apex, came the final twist that would define the headlines. Olivia Reed posted a statement to TMZ, verified and timestamped. "FAA confirms James Harrison as former regulatory advisor for federal flight systems. Omnisys Solutions currently holds over 60% of market share in aviation algorithm licensing." Alongside it was a short video, a clip from 2016 of James speaking at a federal aviation conference. The greatest threat to safety, he'd said then, is not turbulence. It's arrogance dressed as policy. That clip alone hit 15 million views within an hour. Yet even with all his power, James didn't seek destruction. He turned to Kevin, who stood stiff in the corner. "You get one option: retraining. You'll enroll in Omnisys's bias reform program. And if you pass, you'll have a job. Not in first class, but in freight logistics, where you'll learn to handle weight without breaking people." Kevin's voice caught. "You'd give me a second chance." James nodded. "I'm not here to cancel. I'm here to correct," passengers murmured. A few clapped. A woman in 2D whispered, "That's real leadership." And in that moment, James Harrison wasn't just the man who shut down an airline. He became something greater, an agent of accountability, who proved that justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply sits down and waits for the world to catch up. 3 days after flight. Landed in Seattle. James Harrison stood in front of a quiet press room, flanked by Olivia Reed, Sophia Diaz, Daniel Croft, and Chloe Singh. Behind them, a digital banner read, "Omnifair Initiative Aviation for Everyone." James stepped to the podium, not as a passenger this time, but as a policymaker. His voice was calm, resonant. "This isn't about one airline," he said. This is about every system that thinks appearance is a metric, every gate where bias hides behind a smile, every algorithm that calculates value by skin tone, age, or attire. He paused as the room fell still. What happened to me on Apex 227 wasn't personal. It was structural. And starting today, we begin dismantling it. With that, James unveiled OmniFare, a sweeping reform mandate adopted by Apex and 5 major U.S. airlines within 48 hours. It included mandatory anti-bias training for all crew real-time behavior auditing via OmniSys sensors and the elimination of all visual risk score algorithms. More significantly, it required airlines to make internal crew behavior logs and seat reassignment decisions available to DOT auditors and independent journalists within 30 days of each flight. Industry leaders grumbled behind closed doors, but the public wasn't asking anymore, they were demanding. Reddit lit up with support. Retired pilots wrote op-eds calling OmniFare the course correction aviation desperately needed. Chloe Singh's Arcourage aviation post now had 6 million upvotes. Daniel's CNN interview with James became the most watched segment of the week. Even passengers who once sat in silent complicity were now calling for reform in online testimonies. But beneath the applause and headlines, something darker was brewing. Sophia, reviewing log data from the system shutdown, noticed a pattern dozens of third-party access requests pinged Apex's servers seconds before James's override. She traced the source to a contractor with no known affiliation with OmniSys. Curious, she dug deeper. What she found blew the story wide open. Apex hadn't just profiled passengers based on appearance, they had been selling those profiles. Every biometric trigger, every flagged risk seat, every complaint filed and suppressed, all of it was being bundled into behavioral data packages and quietly sold to private firms, insurance companies, travel brokers, and even political research groups. When Sophia showed the files to James, he didn't speak for a full minute. Then he said, "We don't just have a bias problem, we have a privacy crisis." Olivia verified the leak, and Daniel ran the story on CNN's special report under the title, "Flight Risk: The Hidden Economy of Passenger Profiling." The public outrage was immediate and seismic. A retired flight attendant turned whistleblower revealed she had been offered bonuses to input supplemental assessments on high-risk-looking passengers' code for anyone who made elite flyers uncomfortable. Within 72 hours, Apex stock fell 62%. Congressional leaders called emergency hearings. The Department of Transportation, under mounting pressure, fast-tracked a bipartisan bill, the Passenger Fairness and Data Protection Act, that made it illegal for airlines to collect, analyze, or share passenger identity data without explicit consent and third-party oversight. Airlines scrambled to adjust. Apex's competitors quietly reached out to OmniSys, asking to license OmniFare tools before their own skeletons hit the light. But James refused exclusive contracts. Reform, he said in a joint statement with Chloe and Sophia, is not for sale. While the aviation world tried to catch up, James stayed grounded literally and figuratively. He visited a flight academy in Atlanta, talking to young black pilots who had watched his story unfold like a movie, but felt its truth, like scripture. He told them, "You're not guests in this industry, you're architects. Start designing like it." He didn't mention Carol Jennings or Kevin Miller again, not in public. But word spread that Kevin, now in retraining, had been assigned to OmniSys's logistics division in Chicago. His first assignment, an internal audit on crew treatment patterns. A small, quiet penance, but one that mattered. The system had cracked. The code had been rewritten. And James had done it without yelling, without rage, without ever standing up from his seat. Not because he couldn't, but because power sometimes speaks loudest when it doesn't move at all. 2 months after the storm that grounded Apex Air's digital empire, the dust had settled, but the memory had not. Carol Jennings's name had quietly disappeared from the industry. Her LinkedIn profile deactivated her pension under review. Last anyone saw, she was working at a private charter company in Reno, filing invoices under a new department title, Operations Support. Brenda Walsh had taken a job at a hotel in Oklahoma City, folding towels behind closed doors. Guests never saw her. Her silence had grown louder than any broadcast. As for Arthur Finch, his name had been removed from every Apex database. The company released a vague statement citing customer conduct violations, but the real sentence came from the court of public perception. His corporate speaking invitations dried up. His board memberships quietly ended. A once proud executive reduced to an online footnote beneath Reddit threads and grainy TMZ clips. None of them apologized publicly. None had to. The world had already seen them in action. But justice wasn't the full measure of the moment, because James Harrison didn't believe in ruin for its own sake. He believed in accountability with a door still open if someone chose to walk through it, and one person did. Kevin Miller. Assigned to OmniSys's logistics office in Chicago, Kevin showed up on time, took notes during retraining, and never once asked for special treatment. He sat in the back, studied hard, and when asked why he gave the same answer every time, because someone gave me another shot. One Friday morning, James visited the site unannounced. He stood in the break room quietly as Kevin wrapped up a workshop on conflict resolution. The room clapped, Kevin turned, and froze. James stepped forward, extended his hand, and said, "Only earn it." Kevin gripped his hand without a word, and something passed between them. Not absolution, not erasure, but the hard-won beginning of something better. And that was the lesson James chose to leave behind, because this wasn't just a story about a flight gone wrong. It was about what comes after what you build once you've shut something broken down. And James built something lasting. OmniFair, once a reactive initiative, became a movement. By the end of the year, 4 more airlines adopted its platform. One introduced anonymous bias assessments from passengers. Another banned onboard seat reassignments without video verification. College aviation programs began teaching OmniFair principles in first-year courses. Chloe Singh led a coalition of passengers turned advocates pushing for equitable design in travel. Sophia Diaz joined the FAA Oversight Board. Daniel Croft's documentary Seat 1A. The Flight That Changed the Skies won a Peabody Award, and James. He returned to work quietly, without press, without tours. But one final twist remained, one the world wouldn't see until Christmas Day. That morning, passengers flying Apex again noticed something new on their boarding passes, a gold triangle beside their names, small, subtle. Below it, a line of text in fine print, equity verified. When asked, an Apex gate agent explained, it means your seat was assigned by human review, not algorithm. It's part of a new fairness audit we do. Travelers smiled, most nodded, some didn't even notice. But one woman older seated in 3A looked at the symbol, then turned to the man beside her. "Didn't that start with someone?" she asked. The man smiled. "Yeah, a guy in seat 1A. He didn't stand up, but he stood for everyone. James never spoke of that moment. He didn't need to. The skies had changed. The code had been rewritten. And somewhere far above the clouds, a man who had once been asked to leave his seat had claimed something far greater, his voice, his dignity, and a legacy that would never fly under the radar again.